the markets are down again. And you're probably feeling the pressure. And I guarantee you, you're not alone. But how we respond in these moments of crisis is really what defines us and where we're going with our portfolio. In this episode, we're going to look not only at what we're going through in today's type market, but also what happened in past market meltdowns that shaped the investor psychology and how we can make a little bit more sense out of what's going on today. Let me grab Walt and we'll get right into it.
Well, it's going to be an interesting episode today. Welcome into Power Your Retirement. I'm Walter Storholt alongside Steve Smith, certified financial planner. And Steve, this is going to be a good episode because we're trying to kind of learn in this year's version of markets crashing and volatility. And you coined before we started the episode today, people being terrified in today's market and in today's world, which I think is a fantastic, like you should submit that to maybe being what we call this era, right? Terrified.
Be a good one.
Fantastic. Because a lot of the crashes we've had throughout history have gotten their own little monikers and names. And so this could be a good one for that. I like it. But what we're going to do today is look through some of the past crashes, and each one kind of gives us a lesson, either of what led to the crash or maybe our, even more importantly, reactions from those crashes and how it molded individuals and perhaps even entire generations to approach and look at money. So looking forward to your responses to this today, Steve, and diving in together. You ready to roll?
I am ready, Walt. Let's do it.
All right. We'll go back to the first one, and that's the biggie, right? The Great Depression, 1929 to about 1939. Take us under the hood of the Great Depression, what we learned from it, and the takeaways there.
Well, what we learned from the Great Depression, really, unfortunately, the lesson was distrust. We didn't have legislation that managed markets. We didn't have any kind of safeguards in markets. We also had way too much leverage in companies. And when everything kind of imploded, it created, rather than go into all the market, different things about the market, what it happened to the people that were invested is they really became distrustful of the market. That's probably the biggest downside. In fact, and a lot of them are past now, but the greatest generation had a lot of those roots, and even sayings came out of it, Walt, like grandma's rainy day fund, right? What did that mean? We're putting some cash in the mattress for a rainy day. That's not in the bank. Yeah. It's not there. We're just stuffing it in a jar, in the sugar bowl, whatever, in the cookie jar, wherever you put it underneath the mattress. And it really is this distrust of banks and markets and stocks. It was unfortunate, and it left a mark. And some people never recovered from that, unfortunately, and weren't able to invest in what I call the greatest ability to create wealth is the stock market.
Yeah, unfortunately, there may have been some good habits that came out of the Great Depression, probably frugality and stretching a dollar and some other virtues, but by missing out maybe on understanding the stock market and with such deep distrust in it, you missed out on maybe so much, and that stuck with many families for quite a while. Yeah. We perhaps, though, overcorrected the other direction when it came to the World War II era and the booming market of 1945 and onward. Take us into that World War II time period and what followed.
Well, that was a time of overconfidence. Those were the kids that came back from World War II and got great jobs in manufacturing, industrialization, and just a fantastic look at the beautiful cars that came out of the 50s. I love going to car shows. I mean, they're just magnificent. Maybe I'm just a car buff, but the point is that it was this overconfidence and just everything was just over the top during that time. And unfortunately, when you have a situation like that in a booming economy, you kind of feel like it always goes up. Maybe like if you get a couple great years, 20% plus years, you get into that third year, you think, well, doesn't it always go up 20%? No.
Yeah.
The answer is no. So that can really create, some deep emotional scars in some people when you have that overconfidence in markets, and people don't really have that history like their parents did in the Great Depression. They're like, why is mom and dad all in cash? I'm making bank here. What's going on? But that's what happened to the next generation that came back from World War II.
Yeah, it's interesting how things happen in cycles like that, right? In different generations. And then I think we'll see some of these things repeat as we go through history a little bit. Something else kind of defined the time period of the late 70s and the early 80s,
Mm.
and that was the soaring interest rates. Interesting, some parallels to what we have kind of been through over the last couple of years as well. But let's at least focus maybe on those late 70s and early 80s. We're getting into the territory where some of your clients are probably remembering those time periods in pretty good detail.
One of the things that comes up frequently if I'm dealing with a client that's in retirement right now, or maybe one that's just close to it, but usually the ones that are in retirement are usually talking about this, about what their first mortgage was. And it was double digits. Some of them working towards 20%, depending on the time frame and the situation. So they talk about that versus 2-3%, or even in the 6-7% world that we're in now. But that's part of the pendulum swing. If we just talked about the overconfidence in markets, which can get you in a bad way, but then you swing the other way where you got this down markets. 70s were really rough, but part of that was because of inflation, and inflation creates higher rates. And in those times, I remember my great grandmother bragging about how she was getting like 15% in the. And I also remember my grandfather, remember Great said that, his face turning red because he had a 20% loan to put his crop in that year, right? So, or maybe it was
So
even
they
more.
think they're making out great, but
So he's like struggling while somebody else is making 15%. But with the inflation that was happening, even at 15%, you weren't making a whole lot of money.
yeah, it's kind of interesting because something like that though can get ingrained in somebody's mind, right? And they think CDs are the way to go. When they were great, they worked for grandma, they worked for so and so. That's how they lived in retirement or during their financial life. Where else can I get a great guarantee like that? But context is everything, and I think that's something that's really important to point out. But that's how easy some way of retiring or some way of doing things can get lodged in your mind, right? You just,
Mhm.
hey, that one time that CD was good to me, so I'm always going to have this sort of bias toward it or this belief in it.
A lot of it is habits as well, Walt. I mean,
Yeah,
we've all kind of heard the joke about the turkey or whatever. They cut the part off or whatever, the chicken. So it's like, why did you cut the back quarter of it off? And finds out that great grandmother didn't have a pan big enough for the turkey, so they cut off
right.
part of it so it would fit. And everybody's been cutting it off in these big
And it,
pans ever
it became
since.
tradition for years and years. Yeah.
Nobody really knew what it was until one day somebody asked the question. But we can fall into things like that, like mattress money and CDs and some of these mentalities, even stocks that they're no good. We got to be careful because we
Yeah.
want to make sure we're finding truth, not just an emotional scar that made an imprint.
All right, we're getting more and more current with each of these as we march through the timeline. We go to 1987, my birth year, Steve.
Yay!
Uh, I don't remember this at all, so that's good thing for me, I guess. But apparently, Black Monday occurred in 1987, and what was the lesson learned there?
Well, the lesson learned there was whiplash, really. The Thursday and Friday leading up were down days. If you go pull it up, and Monday came around, so everybody got to stew on what was going on, and all of a sudden, boom, a 22% drop in one day on Black Monday, and that was enough. In addition to the Thursday Friday, was enough for investors to cement that gut wrenching bottom pit feeling that never really goes away, knowing that could happen and erase that much wealth in that short of a period of time. But you got to realize, and Warren Buffett's just known for this, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but I'll give you this sentiment. And he talks about how he lost, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars or something like that. I wish I had the number. But then he goes on Black Monday, but he didn't sell. So he really lost nothing. And he actually took an opportunity to buy some things. So he actually made money on Black Monday. It was actually a net positive for him. So it's all in how you process that whiplash. Is it that scar that, hey, I don't want to go through this again? Or can you possibly look at it like, this too shall pass, and I'm going to take a little bit of cash that I have and use it as an opportunity? Now, that is a strong investor.
Yeah, no kidding. I think it's interesting too. Like that was an unprecedented day, Black Monday. Like we've had some bad days recently, but still, as at the time of our taping today, nothing that comes close to that 22%. So, and it's not like there's a long list of drops that are in that neighborhood. It's kind of in a class of its own, right? And then there's a step down before you get to the next batch.
Yeah, and we have circuit breakers and different things that are going to help people breathe along the way. So it's a little bit different situation today than it was back then as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. All right, then we get to the .com crash. All right, now really coming into everybody's memory, I think at this point, especially folks you're probably working with who have been maybe in their jobs for a couple of years at this point. They were alive to at least know what was going on in that 2000 time frame. And take us under the hood of the .com crash.
Oh, I remember this well. It's skepticism of hope, maybe, is what we'll coin this one as. And it isn't just about, that was about the internet and what that was going to do, e-commerce. Hopefully you didn't get sucked into the pets.com with the sock puppet, or something. Hopefully you just took Amazon used books. Hopefully you took that at that time. That worked out well for you. But it was the skepticism of hype and I would maybe even hope almost of these amazing outsized returns that you just basically get a website and a product to sell and you become a millionaire. Well, we all know that's not how it works. It can work that way if you have a business plan and you're able to execute on it like an Amazon, but most didn't make it. And that bubble burst really affected a lot of people because a lot of people were actually pulled into, in my generation, pulled into the market because of the hype, and then they got burned a little bit. And now most have recovered, but for many years it was difficult. And one thing I learned from that .com crash or .bomb, whatever you want to call it, is that we don't want to not like new technology, but we also don't want to overhype it. And things that in today's world, you got to be very careful with, not avoid. I didn't say that. Be very careful with are things like AI companies. Are they providing real value? Is there real revenues? You also have, the Mag 7 overvaluation potentially. Obviously, that is not the case today. But potentially, I guess they could go down further. I shouldn't mark that as a bottom, but they've come back a long ways, but they rode a serious uptrend. But you've got to be careful about that. Even crypto, right? We saw crypto just double, triple for what? For what reason? Well, market demand. That's exuberation. That's that skepticism of hype and a little bit of hope of big returns. So that's what I would say about the .com. Don't ignore new technology because it's probably one of your greatest opportunities, but be very careful that you don't just, go along with anything because a lot of it will fall away as the technology gets developed.
Yeah, diving in with 2 feet into pets.com didn't work out. And just remember, there's going to be a pets.com with kind of every new thing that comes along. And so be ready for that. We get to one that's a little bit different, Steve, and this one hits close to home for me because I graduated college kind of at the bottom of the Great Recession, 2008, and then into 2009 was hitting the job market. And this one was a little bit different because it wasn't just the market having a bad day. This was rounded out, I guess, just in a little bit different form. A scary time for those who were kind of into their working years at that point, for sure.
Yes, this was fear of total collapse, and we were actually closer to that than what a lot of people really realize with our financial banking system at the time, because people were, whole neighborhoods in large growing areas, maybe like Southern California and different, metropolises of, they were basically just building out these mega plans, master plans of housing, and people were just walking away. Well, banks aren't bulletproof. That's leverage and they don't have buyers for all those homes because people were kind of hunkering down because they were losing jobs. The stock market was going down 40-50%. And it's just like it was kind of hitting people from all angles. When your job and your house and your 401k or your investments are all hurting all at once, that will leave an emotional mark. And that one was, for me at least, and all the ones that we've talked about, I would probably pick the Great Depression, but I didn't live through that, not even close. But that one for me left the biggest mark, to make sure that diversification and not getting too over your skis is really important, to make sure that we match people and even my own financial plan, match it to our tolerances, because sometimes things like that can happen. But I haven't seen anything before or since that was really that deep.
Yeah, but the mentality certainly sticks with you, because I feel like when we went through the next one that's on our list, and it has its own lessons, as well as even just recently, 2 years ago, with some of the smaller banks that were kind of going under, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and issue, and even the kind of the current thing we're going through now. I still find myself always looking for, is this the next 2008? Is this the next total collapse? So
Right.
I'm feeling that this is a mentality that was ingrained in me in a very formative time. This is going to probably be with me for the rest of my life. Whenever we hit turmoil, thinking, "Oh, is this another big one? Is this where it's all over?" Which, obviously, trying to combat some of that feeling, but it's something that you can recognize. Okay, I see why previous generations may have had this certain mentality. Stick with them. Let's break down COVID. The market crash of 2020. Lesson there.
I think it's whiplash again, just like '87. Maybe
Okay.
the sequel, Whiplash, the sequel. But I think a lot of the drop came from that pure fear and that hangover from 2008. Really, it was the hangover from that, where it's like, oh, we're facing the unknown again, and that was that fear of total collapse coming back in, and that's why the drop came down. And then when enough information came out and the Federal Reserve kind of came to the rescue and bolstered everything up, when people started feeling, oh, it's going to be okay, we had that rocket ship straight up,
Yep.
right? So people also realizing that, hey, it's not the end of the world, but we're probably going to have to still wear masks and stay at home for a while. But other than that, it's going to be okay. So that was really an emotional down, a hangover from 2008, and then also the realization that, okay, it's going to be fine. So people just popped right back up.
Yeah, it's a great point. Seeing that hangover of that feeling of the 2008 recession bleeding into that one, and maybe even bleeding into what we're going through in 2025. So finally, we get to the current crash, or what we're going through right now with the volatility in the market, the ups and the downs, and the more downs than ups lately, it seems. And you kind of coined this one maybe as terrified back when we were chatting. So I know it's a complex situation, but tariffs seem to be the driving force and the main topic of conversation surrounding our current issues. Any lessons to be learned from this one yet, or do we need to kind of work our way through it to see what the final result's going to be?
Well, I think the lesson in this, no matter where we end up, or if it's a long period of a downturn, or if it's something more like the COVID V type spike, I think it's going to be more of a muted, like that. But just know that these are headline things. Okay, just like when the tariffs were announced. I'll give you one better one, because Terrified started long before when they were all announced on April 2nd. Terrified happened when the current president got on television and talked about tariffs, and you could just watch the market sink. Even if it was an up day, even if it didn't have to go negative on the day, but you could just see it go down. Well, that's a fearometer, if you will. People are just like, what is that? Is that going to affect my job, is that going to affect, being able to buy, whatever it is that they buy? A new Nintendo, or maybe it's just all the little trinkets at Walmart. What was it? For my wife, it was like, oh, Lulu's a Canadian company. How am I going to get my workout gear? But anyways, I think she's going to be fine. The point is that this is actually about uncertainty and fear of inflation, is really what it boils down to. And people don't know how much more expensive, because we've already had a lot of inflation since the COVID crash. And people just are looking at their paychecks and looking how they're managing their households right now, and they just really can't process another 25% of inflation. And that, I think, is creating a lot of fear.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve. Last but not least, let's get some overall lessons out of this. How does this tour through past market crashes sort of shape your view of what we're going through currently in our current volatility? And what are you telling your clients as you try to navigate through 2025's ups and downs?
Well, I'm telling most, if not all, to really weather the storm with this, because this is all headline risk. This is all, the tariff announcement, the negotiations. And typically, these types of negotiations happen in boardrooms, all the time. It's backroom deals. Coke is always trying to get it into different countries, and how are we going to sell our Coca-Cola all over the world? And they've got to negotiate how they're going to get their Coca-Cola into every country. That's happening all the time, and sometimes they have to renegotiate to get that in there, because maybe there's a bottler, that's in the country that wants some business, and they got to work this out. And so this is a normal process that companies go through all the time. We just don't always see a country negotiating the trade and the trade deficits in the news. So that is what's really interesting, doing it all at once and all of that. So I would say that headline risk doesn't mean that we have this imminent doom. It just means that you're seeing all of this uncertainty play out in front of the cameras. And that's going to create emotional fear. And the more fear we have, the more markets go down. And as you see some of this start to turn around, like deals come back and people start to see hope in the process, which will happen, then you're going to see the opposite. So be encouraged. Don't shortchange yourself by selling at the bottom. And this too shall pass, and this headline and this process of negotiation will pass. So just be encouraged.
Yeah, it's helpful. Thank you, Steve. And it's an interesting not theory, but like kind of what we're going through. You're exactly right. Like we're seeing things, not just with the tariffs, but with some other things, other policy, other conversations that normally happen behind closed doors, happening out in the opening, kind of in real time on TV and social media. And so that is a little bit of new territory, I think, seeing some of these negotiations play out. We're seeing how the sausage gets made, perhaps, and the reactions to all of that in real time are interesting. So the part of the new world, I guess, that we're in now.
Agreed.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the year shapes up. If, as we've talked about things today, you've learned some lessons about your financial life, maybe you feel like, hey, I'm susceptible to inflation. That is not something I've really planned for or thought about for my financial future for retirement. I really don't know how my 401k is invested. I don't know if I'm exposed to some of these risks that we've talked about on the show today. Well, now is a great time. We just did a recent episode about that gut check that these moments should cause for you financially. And so take advantage of a review of your portfolio. Pick up the free retirement toolkit that Steve offers. You can get that information at powerupyour401k.com. Steve has specific programs for the power industry. So if you're an employee of a publicly traded utility, these are great resources for you. Steve has access to exclusive programs as part of that. Just a great system that he's got set up to help you learn about your financial situation now and what you should be doing going into the future. You can find links and contact information to everything in the description of today's show, or again at powerupyour401k.com. Go check it out today. Steve, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, thanks, Walt. Thanks, everyone.
This podcast is provided by Powerhouse Financial Advisors, an independent firm with advisory services offered through Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc., PAS, a federally registered investment advisor. The information provided is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as personalized investment advice. PAS does not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of this information for your specific circumstances. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's goals, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments carry a degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any case studies, testimonials, or endorsements shared in this podcast are illustrative of individual experiences and may not be representative of the experience of all clients. They do not guarantee future performance or success. You should not infer any level of assurance regarding future financial outcomes. Listeners should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any investment decisions. Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Be sure to consult with your tax and legal professionals regarding your specific circumstances. For a copy of our Form ADV Part 2A, which provides additional information about PAS, including our advisory fees and services, please visit powerhousefinancialadvisors.com.